Alrighty, welcome and hello everybody to this special webinar event, Prevent Modern Threats at Every Stage of the Attack Lifecycle. Today's exciting webinar is sponsored by Palo Alto Networks and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Mackenzie Puttasi with Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this conversation today because countering modern threats requires a cutting-edge solution and a robust cybersecurity defense. And we are going to dig into that today. As adversaries evolve and leverage AI to enhance their attacks, traditional network security measures are no longer sufficient. And today's sophisticated attackers are exploiting widely available tools to target vulnerabilities, making it increasingly difficult for organizations to detect and defend against unforeseen threats. Modern network security demands a comprehensive approach that provides visibility into emerging threats, risks, and applications while overcoming existing cybersecurity gaps. Today, you will discover how to neutralize adversaries at every stage of the attack lifecycle with Palo Alto Networks cloud-delivered security services, a comprehensive suite of cloud-based solutions designed to protect against a wide range of threats. This is going to be such a cool conversation, and personally, I cannot wait to get started. So let's zip through the housekeeping and get things on our way, shall we? Alrighty, first I want to draw your attention to the questions section of your webinar console. This is the best place to get involved, get interactive, and post all of your insightful questions, comments, feedback, and ideas. We do want to hear from you, so why don't you find that questions tab now, and we can start out with a quick hi, hello, hola, bonjour, happy holidays, and give a little wave to the virtual community out here with you today. As a quick side note, that window is also the best place to reach out and let us know if you have any technical issues during the session. Knock on wood, of course, that doesn't happen, but usually a browser refresh, as simple as it may sound, should get rid of the usual tech gremlins. But if not, just shoot us a quick message in that questions tab, and the actual tech team and I will be there to help. And the last thing I want to point out on your audience console, nested inside that same window there, is the handouts tab. You can check out some cool resources and follow-ups to our conversation we'll be having with the Palo Alto team here today. There's a research study in there. There's also the SLR cyber threat assessment link, so you can assess your readiness against cyber threats. And finally, the virtual ultimate test drive. So great follow-ups to a bunch of incredible chats we're going to be having today here shortly. And if all that cool content wasn't enough of a sweet giveaway, we also have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize, and all the winners must meet the Actual Tech Media the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you're not sure what those are, well, you can find the full T's and C's linked in the handouts tab as well. Okay, well, I believe we have finished everything we need to talk about during our housekeeping. And with that, we are ready to get our speakers on out here with us. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to John Harrison, who's the security evangelist covering NetSec and Unit 42 over at Palo Alto Networks. And we've also got Taylor Edema, the VP of Product Management over at Palo Alto Networks. And well, I'm very excited to have these two on stage. I'm excited to hear what you guys have prepared for us. And I'm going to kick things off first, or over to Tyler to kick things off for us first. So Taylor, take it away.
Great to be able to speak with you all today. What we're going to be doing is walking through the latest in what's going on with the modern threat landscape, how attackers continue to breach organizations and carry out their attacks, some of the recent tricks and evasion tactics, and even use of generative AI that we're starting to see in the threat landscape, and then see how Palo Alto Networks has new approaches to seeing and stopping the modern adversary, and how we take these approaches and we layer them one after the other to make sure that we're as successful as you can possibly be in breaking the attacker lifecycle. To start off with, let's take a look at what's happening with the modern threat landscape and how attackers are taking advantage of the modern enterprise and how complex it's grown that helps adversaries, break into organizations. Number one, we're seeing the attack surface itself. It's bigger than ever. We have organizations with hundreds or even thousands of IoT devices across the organization where patch levels are inconsistent. Policies are not least privilege or zero trust. And so lots of challenges around just the nature and complexity of the devices on the network. At the same time, we see the continued rollout of SaaS applications, enterprises moving to SaaS instead of data center hosted applications, where now the majority of enterprise data and users' day-to-day jobs are performed over SaaS and in the browser. And so just a marked shift in how data is processed, where it's accessed, and how attackers can ultimately get to that data. At the same time, the security stack is constantly growing in complexity, right? We've got organizations out there that are on average using about 32 disparate security tools to try and secure the organization. And all of these security tools come with their own management consoles. They come with their own capabilities that may or may not be consistent or compatible with one another. And just the management overhead alone tends to be, a pretty significant for most organizations. And the most important part, perhaps, is that none of these tools are actually sharing visibility or data or intelligence with one another. And so they're very siloed point products that end up missing the fact that an attacker needs in order to breach an organization, they need to stitch together multiple different steps together in order to get into the organization. And the siloed tools aren't able to keep up with the adversary because they're not able to connect those same dots. And at the same time, the barrier to entry for attackers is continuously being lowered with the availability of malware kits and phishing kits and all those things that we've had for some time that get better and better and better. But now with AI on the scene, it's just amazing to see the innovation, not just on the defender side, but on the adversary side or attacker side. And seeing examples of how AI can be a massive tool to the benefit of the attacker in terms of generating perhaps really high quality phishing emails that might have been more difficult in the past to create, and doing so at scale, being able to quickly and easily target whole swaths of the internet. So really interesting to see how AI has really changed the game on the attacker side as well. So what I'd like to do is walk through a few different examples now of how the modern adversary is leveraging new tools, innovations in AI, phishing kits, red team tools, et cetera, to break into organizations today, and just walk through some examples of how this works and what a challenge it presents to the modern network defender. Starting on the left with the first one, we're seeing a rapid rise in the use of what we call red team tools or penetration test team tools by attackers in order to breach organizations. These are tools that are, for the most part, commercially available, used by defenders and red teams to test the organization's defenses. But these tools are actually very sophisticated and very capable. And so, put in the hands of the wrong people, they can actually be used for offensive purposes. And so we'll see now examples of, lesser sophisticated as well as all the way up to nation state level adversaries using tools like Cobalt Strike, like Empire, and a handful of others to breach organizations because they're very capable. They do what the adversary needs them to do. It makes attribution harder, and they don't need to burn their own tools in the process. And so, on a year-over-year basis, now we've seen about a 73% year-over-year increase in tools like this being used by attackers in order to breach organizations and establish command and control.
Hey, Taylor, I think this is one of the ones to really focus on because tools like Cobalt Strike, one of the reasons why the pen testers love it and the adversaries love it is because the traffic looks exactly like normal network traffic. And so the SOC's sitting there going, hey, everything looks fine. And you can include a malleable or C2 profile, a changeable profile that says, make it look like there's a Microsoft update going on. Make it look like someone's watching a video and everything looks fine. And this is one great example where traditional tools absolutely fall apart. And this is in everyday commodity malware. And it's one of those things that's not easily detectable.
That's right. That's right. Talk about needle in the haystack, and they're just able to blend in so well now. And we know that the traditional signature-based approaches don't work if this traffic looks like everything else. Um, the next example here we have is malware, right? So malware, of course, has been around forever. The interesting thing we're seeing with malware is just this continued evolution of packing tools, obfuscation tools. Even we're seeing use now of generative AI You might have seen examples out there in the media or in the software industry of using generative AI to write software for software engineering purposes. We also see these same tools can be used to write malware or to take existing malicious code and rewrite it so that existing signature-based or pattern-based approaches don't work anymore. And so now with Gen AI, we've now got at-scale tools to take every known attack and endlessly turn it into unknown attacks. And we're seeing this play out with malware today. Moving on to the phishing front. So phishing as well has been around for forever, basically. And what we're seeing now is the phishing kits and adversaries that use phishing techniques out there, whether it be for luring a victim to a malicious website to download malware or exploit the system, or good old-fashioned credential phishing, steal usernames and passwords, etc. Um, that also is evolving, right? So the days of being able to crawl websites and detect that it's phishing or malware are really coming to an end, because we see phishing attacks using various cloaking techniques to hide their pages, their malicious pages, behind various cloaking layers. For instance, looking at geofencing techniques or browser fingerprinting. We see phishing attacks hidden behind CAPTCHA challenges. And we also see now more and more phishing hosted on legitimate SaaS applications. So any SaaS app that can host user provided content, they can actually build a phishing page that looks like your corporate SSO login or your financial institution, and host that right within applications like these website building tools and SharePoint and Google Forms, etc. And it makes it very difficult for network defenders to tell the difference between legitimate use of SaaS applications versus phishing posted from SaaS applications. And so,
Yeah,
go ahead, John.
yeah, the sophistication of some of these the toolkits like Evil Jinx, Evil Gen X is one of the ones that includes TLS certificates, and it includes all these little fishlets that it makes the perfect phishing email that it's actually even proxying to your real login page, and this makes really the traditional defenses absolutely not possible. Like you said, the URL crawlers or even email security easily get bypassed with this.
Yeah, that's a great point on the proxy-based phishing attacks. That's a great way for attackers to steal your credentials and in real time replay them to the actual target, whatever login that is. And then even if there's a multi-factor challenge like an OTP challenge, you get text message on your phone, or an authentication app. Then they collect that from the victim as well and replay it against the victim system. So a lot of people out there think, well, I've got multi-factor off, so phishing's not a problem anymore. But in reality, anything that's OTP based, can still be phished with this attacker in the middle phishing technique. DNS is one of my personal favorites. It's just such a fascinating case of attackers taking a protocol and using it in ways that you just don't expect in order to accomplish their objectives. As we all know, DNS, the sort of phone book of the internet, looking up domains resolving to IP addresses, for example. When you look at DNS as a protocol, it's internet facing, it's bidirectional, and it can carry data, which makes it a fantastic covert channel for an adversary to use. And we see attackers now using more and more DNS for covert command and control, covert data exfiltration, establishing a C2 command and control with their for their malware from the inside out. And so just the amount of creative ways that attackers abuse DNS is really amazing. And so we see just millions of malicious domains per day, and the tricks that are out there to just continue to be effective, because not every enterprise out there is looking at DNS specifically in that light. It's just looked at as utility, but unless you're actually focused on it, it's really more of a tool for the adversary.
Yeah, not enough of them are looking at it. It's wide open, right? We need DNS to communicate, and we know 85% of malware uses DNS for that initial connection. So you're missing a key opportunity to stop the attack right as soon as it potentially goes out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. On the IoT front, IoT is in some ways similar to DNS, right? It can be this massive blind spot, or it can be an opportunity. But we just see, too often it really is this blind spot where, these are devices that traditionally are overlooked. Updating and patch levels aren't quite up to par oftentimes. They're not necessarily monitored for login or suspicious activities. Maybe the network policy securing, around that device to secure it from unexpected or unauthorized connections isn't quite where it should be. And so, it's a good reminder that as a defender, we need to look at assets like IoT in the same way that an attacker does. And when an attacker sees IoT, they're looking at a device that has a CPU, memory, storage, network card, and these are all you need to, and a software stack, of course. And these are then all you need to use IoT to break into an environment or move laterally across an environment, to persist within an environment once you get inside. Use it. They're useful in building command and control chains across the organization to get to your final target and then get that data out, for example. So really, in some sense, it really has to be a first class citizen and thought of as just like any other desktop or traditional endpoint.
And every enterprise has some of the most vulnerable IoT devices out there. And it's kind of interesting because if there's a vulnerable Log4j server, Log4Shell server over there, or an Apache Struts server, there might be 20 people going, oh my God, we've got to patch that. But
Yeah.
security cameras and printers are two of my go-to devices that have some of the worst vulnerabilities and are wide open and never being inspected.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. On the stats front, we talked a lot about this a little bit already, but just can't overemphasize the fact that virtually all of a typical employee's day to day now is happening over SaaS. In the browser, data has moved into SaaS, and we start to see now that every application now is a potential vulnerability, but it's a vulnerability that is not sitting within your data center. It's now this internet hosted SaaS application. And so those apps are points of weakness potentially if they're not configured correctly. All of these applications have dozens or even hundreds of settings, some of which are security relevant, and you've got all kinds of administrators in there tweaking things all the time, and potentially exposing that app or weakening it and making the data potentially available to an attacker to take advantage of. In addition to the security posture of these applications and the data within, as I mentioned earlier in the phishing case, we see SaaS itself being used as an attack vector too. So phishing is one example. We see malicious links being shared between employees. If an account is compromised and now it can Slack or message over Teams or other collaboration apps, other coworkers, and share a link that might be a phishing attack, might be a malware download that I see from a colleague and I trust automatically, and I click that link and now I've downloaded something that I think is a document, but in reality, it's now a remote access privilege, for example. So lots of interesting uses of SaaS as an attack vector. And then the last item here is AI applications. This is something that is probably the newest of everything, on the slide. Really exploded onto the scene, of course, just going back maybe a couple of years now, where almost overnight, everyone went from doing their job in their SaaS applications and using mostly these sanctioned SaaS apps to now using all of these tools that are out there to with good intentions, usually, of course, doing their job better, faster, etc. But these applications, ChatGPT and all of these others, the employees are now oftentimes posting, copying and pasting all kinds of data into these applications. Again, usually with the best of intentions, but not familiar with how that data is actually used, how it's putting that data at risk. And so just use of unapproved AI tools is starting to become a real challenge. It's not just those flagship apps like ChatGPT that everyone knows about. All kinds of applications are baking in, sort of co-pilot type concepts and other uses of generative AI, where it just provides more and more opportunities for users to share data or send out data that they shouldn't be doing. And so we're seeing both consumer apps and enterprise apps bake in more of this functionality, and it just provides more vectors for potential data loss.
So I think that means for our customers listening here today, your attack surface just got a little larger, and it's something you need to be aware of. What are you training these AI applications? What's going out to the internet? And what are people bringing in as your developers are going to Hugging Face and bringing down modules for code development and things
Yeah,
like that?
right, right, right. And so we take up the sum total of everything we just talked about. And, we did this study where we looked back a couple of years to today, and then project in the future how this is impacting the speed at which attackers are innovating, how fast it is to build new ransomware that's never been seen before that would get through traditional antivirus, for example, or how quickly someone can compromise and exfiltrate PII or other confidential data, or how quickly someone can find a vulnerability, productionize it, and exploit an organization using that vulnerability. And we just see in all three of these cases that time frame just continues to get really halved or even more cut down year over year. And that's in no small part to topics we've touched on already: automation and the use of even AI on the attacker side. So really interesting sources of how these how automation is driving these timeframes down. So one thing becomes, I think, immediately clear to all of us, which is you add up all of these techniques and all of these new innovations on the attacker side, and you see that clearly signatures and databases just aren't enough anymore. Signatures are easily evaded with fairly trivial changes to known attacks to make them unknown. Databases have the same weakness, and as we saw with some of these examples around phishing attacks that hide behind different cloaking techniques and other techniques to keep security vendors away from discovering what that bad site is. The traditional database lookup methods aren't working anymore. And really the only way to see and stop these kinds of modern attacks is with not just AI, but inline AI, right? You've, I'm sure, seen examples of various security products and approaches out there that have started to bake in machine learning really for a number of years now. And of course, we were at the forefront, starting with Wildfire back in 2011, and starting to add machine learning to malware detection and analysis. And we continue to evolve over the years. But one fundamental shift has to happen, which is AI and ML are great, but it's only truly effective if you can actually do that in line in real time on production traffic, so that you can see it as it happens. You're not, the attacker can't hide when you're actually looking at that production traffic happening in real time. And then that's the only way to actually stop it, is to be fully in line. And so if we take a look at all of these different, what we think of as requirements for how to use that AI, again, it's got to be real time, it's got to be inline. We need to be able to pull together data from different data sets and thousands and tens of thousands of customers, and build that flywheel or that network effect so that the models get trained better, they detect more things, they can extract more data, and then they can train themselves to get better and better and better. And then, of course, this capability, if it's great, well, that's great, but we want to deliver it everywhere. So it can't just be sitting in a malware sandbox behind your email flow, or it can't just be sitting, behind your web security solution, or it can't just be looking at things on the endpoint. You really want that capability delivered, holistically across the entire organization. And so that's really what we set out to do, right? We've introduced this concept called precision AI, and we've rebuilt all of our security services with precision AI as the foundation. And so you might ask, well, what is precision AI? It's not just a slick name, right? It's this unique combination of three different approaches or uses of different AI techniques into one architecture that allows us to be uniquely effective at seeing and stopping the most sophisticated attacks that we see out there in the real world. The first is machine learning, right? So as I mentioned, this has been a technique or a class of techniques that have been out there for some time, and we really started on this journey a number of years ago, and it continues to prove its value, right? So moving away from traditional pattern matching and databases and regular expressions and all those other signature formats, and moving more towards a feature extraction and clustering kind of approach, where we can actually let the machines extract the data and be able to provide a looser match that allows us to catch more attacks. And that's kind of the heart of how powerful machine learning can be for seeing and stopping attacks. But we took it a step further, and we really made deep learning now a central part of what we do as well. And we have a whole presentation just on deep learning, but to summarize, deep learning takes this a step further and allows the machines themselves to figure out what's important by looking at massive data sets of labeled data to understand how to connect those dots and how to figure out what's important to extract and build classifiers out of. And so now the humans are kind of out of the loop in terms of processing these massive data sets and figuring out what's important. It's not necessarily a team of experts that do what they think is the right answer. It's actually the machines that learn for themselves. And time again, when these approaches have been rolled out into all kinds of different categories of product, the logic has just come up with amazing results. And it's no different with security. We've seen absolutely amazing detection and predictive capability rolling out deep learning, as part of our foundation. And then the third and last component here is generative AI. Generative AI is both a very powerful tool in terms of our user experience in helping our customers configure their solutions and ask questions and do their day-to-day jobs around configuration and monitoring and assessment. And so we've built these co-pilots now across our entire portfolio. But not just on the user experience side of things. We also use generative AI on the detection engine side of things as well. And as we'll get into some examples here, we'll actually, in anticipation of attackers using generative AI to create new attacks or to obscure or change existing attacks, we'll actually do that ahead of time. We'll take attacks that are out there. We'll use generative AI to reshape them, to rebuild them, and make them new, so that we can train our models on that. Or we'll ask generative AI to create new attacks that have never been seen before and train on that. And so that way we're one step ahead of the attacker because we know that these tools can be used for bad as well as for good. And we take all those three concepts and we combine them into like I said, a foundation that we call precision AI that allows us to take the strengths of all three of these approaches and really combine them into something that is truly in rarefied air in terms of our detection capability. And so when you zoom out now and you look at the whole portfolio, the whole network security portfolio, the layer that we're mostly focused on today, and we're going to provide some examples of how we actually use this technology across these security services, is sort of that middle layer there, advanced threat prevention, URL filtering, wildfire, DNS security, which constitute our core network security services, those first four, and we'll go into a bit more detail on those. But we also have other services around data security with SaaS security or CASB, data loss prevention, AI access, as well as IoT security. And so that's our what we call cloud delivered security services layer. And the key point here is that layer, you'll notice, is consistent across our entire platform. Meaning that it's the same security capabilities you're able to get from our hardware, from branch hardware all the way up to big iron data center type hardware. It's our same VM series that runs in your private or public clouds. It's that same cloud delivered security with our Prisma Access service that provides SASE for remote branch or remote user security, always on security. And so all of the use cases, whether it be campus branch, third-party contractors, et cetera, remote or hybrid workers, all benefit from that consistent uniform security capability. And so everything that we're going to talk about now is equally applied across all of those locations. And before we get into some of the details on a service by service basis, just in terms of raw numbers, you can just see what an impact Precision AI is already making on the platform. We've got a customer base of roughly 70,000, millions of next-gen firewalls. And when you see next-gen firewall, think sensor and effector or enforcement point. Those millions of sensors are gathering these billions of events analyzed every single day. And of course, in data science and in machine learning, data is everything. You live or die by data in terms of volume and quality. And so we've got all these amazing events coming in. We've got one of the world's best, if not the best, layer 7 processing engine, decoding engine out there in every single one of those sensors. And so we're just collecting this massive, massive amount of high quality, decoded and interpreted network data. And that's to say nothing of the endpoint side, which is a whole other data source. And we ingest this into the Precision AI engine. And what that allows us to do is train existing models, retrain existing models, build net new models. And so across the platform, we've got over 4,000 machine learning models now that are each tasked with doing one specific job very, very well. And we add those all up together. And the net effect is we're blocking now about just over 11 billion total attacks inline per day. And the interesting thing is, of those 11 billion, A full 2.3 million roughly on a day-to-day basis are what we call zero-day or unknown blocked attacks inline per day. Now, of course, if we didn't have any of this technology and we were back in the signature and database days, that number would effectively be zero. And so that 2.3 million is the sum total benefit of all of the technology that we're discussing here today. So a pretty amazing scale. And so those first four, what we call core security subscriptions, threat prevention, wildfire, URL filtering, and DNS are really what we're going to zoom in on here and provide just a vignette or a quick snapshot of how we're using precision AI technology to see and stop the modern adversary across network security and command and control, or intrusion prevention and command and control, with threat prevention, wildfire for malware sandboxing and detecting and stopping unknown malware, URL filtering, of course, is our flagship web security service. So we're going to look into how advanced URL filtering stops those unknown web attacks that hides from traditional security vendors and proxies and web crawlers. And then we'll take a look at what's new with DNS security and how we're stopping the latest types of attacks and abuse of DNS. So in order to walk through these services, I think it's useful to look at a kill chain or attack lifecycle, as this sequence of steps that an attacker has to go through to ultimately, breach the organization, get at their target, and accomplish their objective, which is very often data theft, data exfiltration. In some cases, it might be different, right? It might be sabotage, or it might be ransomware. So it's always some variant of these the final goals, but very often the steps to get there look somewhat similar and can be modeled roughly in this way of what we call a cyber kill chain. And so, you'll see a flow look something like this, where initial access is sometimes I click on a link, might be in an email, might be from someone over Slack whose account was compromised. It might be a website that was compromised that I'm visiting, or I get redirected somewhere where I shouldn't be. And ultimately, I end up getting tricked into opening an attachment or downloading a malware, or maybe an exploit was triggered and the malware download happens without my knowledge. And usually after that malware is delivered, that malware turns around and phones home. So the attacker now establishes that remote connection and can, from there, execute next steps, which are oftentimes around lateral movement, right? Maybe the initial target, the initial victim isn't my intended ultimate target. And so I now want to pivot across the organization, dump creds, move more, move laterally, go get after the email server, domain controller, data center, or other high value target, and then eventually walk out, with the data that I'm after. And for each of these steps, I'll call out a few examples of how the attacker is doing it today, where they're continuing to break through traditional defenses. And we'll walk through how Palo Alto Networks network security platform solves those challenges with precision AI. So with something like initial access, that link to that phishing website, as I mentioned, oftentimes that phishing page is cloaked or hidden behind tricks like CAPTCHA challenges or browser fingerprinting. There might be all graphics, all visual, and so a typical algorithm can't see it. And so the attacker or the victim ultimately is tricked into entering their credentials. On the malware side, virtually every vendor, most networks out there now have some version of sandboxing done somewhere. And the challenge there is, okay, well, the attacker knows that too. And so more and more now we see malware being built to be sandbox aware and to hide from commodity sandboxing. And this used to be a tool just of the more sophisticated adversaries out there, but now this is in kits. And so malware creation kits can wrap malware into basically sandbox protection wrappers and evade many of the commodity sandboxes out there. On the phone home front, we see malware payloads generating unknown C2 that blends in with normal traffic, like John was saying with these red team tools, where you'll just never see it. It completely blends in. It's very, very difficult to see and stop modern unknown C2 from these red team tools, as well as other malware families that are starting to emulate that behavior. On the lateral movement front, zero-day vulns are always high value and very, very useful if you've got one. And there seems to be a never-ending supply. And so if I am trying to breach a hard target and I can land in the environment and there's other services, other software running internally, and I happen to have a 0-day at my disposal, I'll use that if I have to in order to move laterally. And so 0 days on the network, on the IPS side, have always been a challenge, right? How do you actually detect and stop a true 0-day before anyone knows about it? And so we'll talk about some really interesting approaches that we've started to deliver in this area. And then lastly, data exfiltration. We talked a little bit about DNS and DNS tunneling in particular as a way to abuse a normal protocol like DNS that virtually everyone has to run in their network. And attackers are finding clever ways to hide data inside of what looks like normal, fully RC compliant DNS traffic. But there's data encoded in those queries in pretty clever ways to be able to get that command and control moving throughout the moving outside of the network. And so as we walk through this model, we'll get into those details of how precision AI is used across the kill chain. But one thing, I always keep in mind myself in how we build these solutions and how we approach these problems is when you're working on breaking that attack chain, your chance of success goes up with the more what I call at bats or opportunities you have to break that attack chain. And so what tends to be a very effective approach is layering as many highly effective technologies as you can that each target those different sequences or those different links in that chain. And so you add up a bunch of these different techniques together, and all of a sudden your probability of intercept or your probability of success goes higher and higher and higher until you get really as close as you can to 100% success. The more of these independent technologies you use that add up their effectiveness to one another. And so, we often hear in industry, the defense in depth and zero trust, and concepts like this. And defense in depth really is a valuable approach and a useful approach, but sometimes that gets conflated or confused with multi-vendor. But really, those two concepts don't necessarily have to have anything to do with each other. In fact, I would argue really don't have anything to do with each other. Defense in depth is really, in my view, more of an approach around having multiple layered defenses and technologies that look out for each other and add up over time. And that those defenses are actually strengthened if they can collaborate and share intelligence and talk to one another, which is something that you don't really get with the siloed point product solution. So I'm a huge believer in defense depth, but what that really means is layering these different technologies that can, add up their effectiveness, talk to each other, be more effective in the end, and deliver the security outcome that we're all looking for. And so now we'll walk through each of those four core services that we talked about and provide some examples of what the attackers are doing, and then how we actually use precision AI and these services to see and stop those attacks. So with phishing, for example, we talked about these attacks being hidden behind geofencing or browser fingerprinting. We see captcha challenges, single-use links, and the effect of all of this is that when the victim web user, the targeted user, lands on that page, they'll get the phishing attack. But if some security vendor crawls that page after seeing the URL somewhere, they might get benign content or an error message or a blank page or redirected somewhere else. And so the net effect is that those evasive phishing attacks usually don't end up in any malicious databases. And so we saw this problem really start to come to a head several years back, and that was really the first major architectural change we made to our services. And one of the foundations of precision AI was evolving into advanced URL filtering, where we've taken all those really advanced and sophisticated machine learning approaches to seeing and stopping and detecting the most invasive attacks, but putting them not behind just web crawlers, but actually putting them in line. And so now when a victim user sees that link, clicks that link, is being delivered that phishing content, now that traffic is selectively routed through our AI engines as that traffic is moving. And now that allows us to see and classify pages that maybe would have been hidden from us if we just crawled it out of band. So it's just a complete architectural change to really how web security is done. And it's allowed us to be tremendously effective at seeing and stopping web delivered attacks. And so if we look at all of the different modules now that we can start to layer in, now that we've got this inline precision AI capability, and we can take a look at what modern phishing looks like and how we defeat those different techniques, we can see that number one, okay, here's an example of a common phishing attack. It's hosted within a SaaS application that makes it very difficult you can't just block the app. You can't just block the URL at the domain level. It's really a full path, you know, um, a page within the SaaS application. And so you have to be able to inspect each individual page view within these SaaS applications in order to see and stop that. In this particular example, this might be also a attacker, a proxy-based phishing attack, like what John was mentioning earlier, where my credentials are being passed straight through to the ultimate victim organization or application. And so any multi-factor challenges, a lot of those multi-factor challenges can just be passed right through. And so ultimately, I could still be phished even if I get an OTP challenge on my phone, for example. The cloaking issue, which we've talked about. This is a page that might serve me a blank page if I come from another machine that's not the targeted machine. And then lastly, it's possible that generative AI was actually used by the attacker to obfuscate the code here. And so if it was maybe known patterns, known phishing patterns, known malicious JavaScript that might be in this page, generative AI takes those known patterns and turns them into unknown. And so any signature-based approaches won't work. And so if I'm using traditional approaches, the traditional web proxy or other more database driven approaches, I'm not going to see that attack at all if I crawl it. My signatures or patterns aren't going to work. And so in the end, the victim is left unprotected here. Versus
Taylor, it's probably good to add also, right? Email security, right? I get captchas in my email all the time, and that's exactly what you mentioned there. We were relying on email security, and that's not the effective layer there.
Yeah, right. Yep, exactly right. And so now what we do with advanced URL filtering is we can layer these different inline capabilities to ultimately see and stop these attacks. So we're inline. We're not falling victim to any kind of cloaking or hiding techniques. We can see inside all phishing pages, including those hosted within SaaS applications. We have modules that specifically target these man-in-the-middle phishing attacks and techniques that bypass multi-factor auth. And we are now pre-training our models against generative AI generated attacks, so that as attackers start to obfuscate or repack or change their attacks using these tools, we've actually pre-trained our models to be robust against those kinds of changes that generative AI models can make. Now, moving on to malware for a minute. Malware is always evolving. It's an art form in and of itself. And one of the trends that we talked about earlier was this trend of malware being increasingly sandbox aware. And there have always been evasion tricks that malware has played with sandboxes around things like the logged in username and the IP address and the process name, even the wallpaper or other configuration elements within the guest image. And slowly but surely, most vendors now have a pretty good handle on that. They're able to kind of mask a lot of the different environmental aspects of their sandbox that allow malware to detect that it's running in a sandbox. But there's one class of techniques that really stands out as being particularly difficult to solve, which is malware that's increasingly taking advantage of the fact that most all of these commodity sandboxes out there that most security vendors use are fundamentally built on the same virtualized hardware stack and the same hypervisors. It's very often QEMU emulated hardware on some kind of KVM or Zen hypervisor that's very easy to detect that you're running in. We see malware that, for instance, can hook Windows API calls in the same way that the sandbox hooks those APIs in the operating system to see that they're running in a sandbox, or to unhook the sandbox so that the sandbox can't monitor what the malware is doing. And this is just a fundamental weakness or limitation into how hypervisors are built, right? Hypervisors weren't traditionally built for malware sandboxing. They're really traditionally built for emulating machines for productivity and application purposes and all kinds of other purposes. But they weren't really built to hide themselves from view per se. So what we've done with Advanced Wildfire is this is a multi-year effort to completely build from the ground up a completely custom hypervisor, not using any of these open source or commercially available options. And so what you have now is our entire analysis stack, all of the data that we're collecting in the sandbox. All of that analysis is happening outside of the guest image completely. We're all at the hypervisor layer. And so all of our analysis hooks, all the data collection, everything is observed beneath the hardware, virtual hardware, and at the hypervisor level. And so what that means is you now have a bit for bit pristine, accurate environment that looks completely like any other guest OS or legitimate endpoint and operating system. And it just makes it amazingly difficult for an adversary to find that they're running in an environment like wildfire. And so when we've rolled this out now, we just saw our detection rates here as an example, detect 26% more malware based on this technique alone. And it really was a fundamental architectural change and a shift, significant shift in our ability to detect and stop the most evasive and advanced malware that's out there.
Taylor, I think the one other thing, I mean, now we also have, and we've had the ability for a while to do inline machine learning prevention as the file is coming across the wire and preventing it, never ever sending it to the sandbox. And doing that right as there, it really just increases prevention capabilities as well. I love that.
Yeah, no, that's a great call out. That's exactly right. Sandboxing fundamentally is an out of band function, right? You can't sit there and sandbox for minutes or more while the user is waiting. And so what we've done is, as John, you point out, is a lot of the detection technology turns out that can be done very fast and statically and actually run on the files as the file is traversing the network. And so with advanced wildfire, yeah, we've shifted more towards how much can we prevent without having to even detonate. And we've seen some remarkable results there as well. Now let's talk about command and control for a minute. John and I, we've talked about some of these red team tools that use malleable C2 profiles and other malware families that are starting to use these tricks around, creating new, never before seen C2 patterns, right? So gone are the days where you'd have these teams of signature writers that can reverse engineer the more common malware families, identify unique patterns in the C2 traffic, and then literally write signatures for them and ship them to their customers as signature pack updates. It just doesn't scale anymore, and it's just the model is completely really broken at this point. And so as we recognize this, we began the journey from threat prevention to advanced threat prevention, where, again, when you hear that phrase advanced, think inline machine learning and precision AI. And that's what allows us to see and stop unknown C2 from tools like Cobalt Strike and these other red team tools and malware families, where we're able to take these massive data sets of packet captures collected from real payloads generated by attackers and generating C2 traffic. And we take all that data and we hand it to the machines, and the machines figure out what's important. How can I discern good from bad? And it trains itself on these data sets to be able to build these models that ultimately end up being very, very effective. And so now we've got, we're actually to the best of our knowledge, the only commercially available product that can see and stop in line unknown C2 from tools like these red team tools, because it's very hard to do and it's hard to get right, and it's hard to have it be accurate enough to put that in line and in block mode. And that's what we've done with advanced threat prevention, where we can now stop north of 99% of the malicious C2 from these pretty advanced attacker tools.
Hey, Taylor, it's good to kind of go into this because we didn't only do machine learning. This is where deep learning came in, because right, we looked at machine learning and even that wasn't enough. And it was only after looking at millions of flows using deep learning in line in real time that we could sufficiently be able to not detect but prevent that unknown command and control. And like you said, 98, 99% prevention rate. The other next generation firewall and SASE solutions are in like the 10 to 20% ratio. So this is a night and day game changing capability example of how precision AI breaking that kill chain really, really effectively. Because sometimes I think companies get that false sense of security where, oh, I have signatures. Folks, they just don't work effectively enough. And you need a totally different innovative approach, which is what we've delivered here.
Right, exactly right. And the only reason why we see other products get the 10 to 20% coverage is, well, that's what's out there in the open or in the intelligence trading community like Virus Total and the other databases out there. Everyone can scrape that data. Yeah, some level of coverage that's not zero, but the point is that those payloads that are going to come after you when someone's attacking you, right? They're going to create the new thing that's not going to be in that data set. And the only way to see and stop that is to have this type of technology.
Yeah, and this is an everyday commodity malware. My Unit 42 researcher, Brad Duncan, writes a website called malwaretrafficanalysis.net. And in 2022, every other day was a different post about Cobalt Strike, Cobalt Strike, Cobalt Strike, Cobalt Strike. And even this summer over here in Europe, we took down 600 Cobalt Strike servers that were still operating effectively. So this could be out there. Can it be in your network? You need a different approach to prevention here.
Right, right. And now, while we're on the topic of advanced threat prevention and the inline deep learning that we talked about, that's amazingly effective at stopping unknown C2. We've taken the same technology and we thought, can we actually start to solve true zero-day vulnerability exploits? And we looked at a couple classes, some of the most common classes of vulnerabilities out there, which tend to be command injection and SQL injection, and see if we can look at training models like what we did with the C2 traffic and train models on large libraries of PCAPs, packet captures on vulnerability exploitation. And it turns out the answer is yes, actually. We can be very effective at stopping true zero-day network exploits in a couple of these classes like command injection and SQL injection. And these are this is now rolled out. This has been available for roughly over a year now, and we're seeing the data come in. And sure enough, we are finding things that there's no CVE for at all. There's no signature coverage. No one knows about them. True 0 days, and we have to kind of reverse engineer the software that was targeted and what the attack was in order to file a CVE and have the vendor patch the issue. So it's just an amazing example of taking this technology and applying it to a new problem. And now we're actually seeing that up to 90% of true zero-day command injection attacks can be identified and stopped using this precision AI technology. So really, really, really exciting stuff. And it's really a game changer for how intrusion prevention is done. Moving on to DNS security. We talked about how attackers are using DNS in all kinds of creative ways, using tunneling to hide data within legitimate DNS queries. And one of the areas that they're really innovating recently that we see in the attack or threat landscape is taking a tunneling concept, which has been around for a number of years now, where for instance, you can hide data encoded as let's say subdomain queries, like you see in the example here. And it's been around for a while, and most products that do DNS security have some anti-tunneling capability. But the attackers, of course, are smart, and they see the defense evolve, and so the attacks evolve as well. And so we see more examples of what we call ultra-slow DNS tunneling, where they'll go lower and slower, right? They will spread their queries out further in time. They'll maybe spread their data exfiltration across multiple top-level domains. All of this in an effort to hide from security vendors, to lower that data rate so it doesn't cross a certain threshold. And we started to see this evolution take place on the attacker side, and so we again needed a different approach. It can't be signature based. It can't be basic thresholding. We needed to take these ML and deep learning approaches and apply it to DNS traffic at scale to be able to see and stop these attacks as they're happening in real time. And that's exactly what we've done with advanced DNS security, where we're looking at that protocol, not just clear text DNS, but now with DOH, encrypted DNS, is a growing problem. We want to make sure we can get that visibility in the encrypted side as well. And we're taking all of these models, we're applying it not just on the request data, but also on the response side as well, so we can see and stop other attacks, not just ultra slow tunneling, but more modern takes on the classic problem of DNS hijacking as well, and really deliver effective capability on the DNS protocol as an attack vector.
Yeah, I mean, the next slide here really highlights there's all the different kind of capabilities, right? The simplest level, they're like domain generation algorithm, right? Malware starts here based on this time and processor information, it goes out there. But we keep adding all these different things. I think this is a great example of Unit 42 research turned into solving really, really hard problems and delivering these with these capabilities. Strategically aged domains is a great example of one that comes to mind. We see this all over the time. The adversary buys domains, waits a year or two, and a really famous example was the SolarWinds attack. And this is one of the things that when you have something as a different approach like this and using a newer approach capabilities, and this is where we've really changed the games. And ultra slow DNS tunneling is another advanced adversary technique that we've now really added an additional layer to be able to stop and prevent this at that stage of the attack.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. And the ability now for us to process inline not just the request data but the DNS response data has unlocked a whole additional set of detections you see on the far right there. We talked a little bit about the DNS hijacking capabilities we have, but that first item there, DNS misconfiguration. We can actually now monitor proactively your own DNS zones and find examples of dangerous misconfigurations that might allow someone to really take control of or hijack a domain that you might own. So it's a pretty common problem where you might have a domain pointing to an IP address or another domain that you don't control anymore, and attackers can take that IP and then take advantage of the trust and reputation of your own domains. And so some really interesting capability now has been opened up with our ability to see the traffic in both directions. So zooming out for a minute, we've now taken a look at each of the services in a little bit more detail and what the attackers are doing and how we're using precision AI to stop those attacks. One thing I also want to point out that is is super important and can be a difference maker in being successful in stopping an attack versus not being successful is this idea of a network effect, which is really one of the key strengths of the platformization approach to securing your network. With platformization, we're able to take these different capabilities and truly network them and share intelligence, share data with one another, and to help them be as effective as they can possibly be. And I break this down into two types of network effects, what I call the customer-to-customer network effect and the threat vector-to-vector network effect. The customer-to-customer network effect is what most people think of when they think of, okay, I'm one of those 70,000 customers. That's great. Now it's very likely that I won't be the very first one targeted with something. It's likely going to land somewhere else, and then I get the benefits of that protection because an attack launched against one is sort of generates the protections for all. And of course, this is we see this play out millions of times a day at this point, where we see something first somewhere in the network, and now the entire community gets it gets inoculated, gets the protections that we can generate from that attack. The one that might be a little bit less obvious is this threat vector to vector network effect, which can be just as powerful. And that is, like I said, this notion of the services sharing data with one another. And so to make that real, an example of that would be, if we see malware, being downloaded by one of your users, and Wildfire detonates that sample, we call it bad. We create AV, signatures to block it. We update our ML models to block it if we can. But one of the other things we do is when we detonate it in our sandbox, we can see who does it reach out to, like what's the phone home address. And we can take that, it's maybe domain and URL, and we share that with, let's say, DNS security and URL filtering. And now you get that protection, not just at the malware download level, but also at the phone home level. And that can be a difference maker because maybe that first person did get infected, or maybe you saw it once somewhere else. We saw it in Wildfire, we're good. But meanwhile, another machine might be BYOD, a device, or some other machine that was maybe off the network and comes onto the network, for example. That's okay because you're protected at the edge now. You've got that that protection at the callback stage of the kill chain. And so that's these services talking to each other, making sure that you've got that vector to vector network effect to ultimately stop the adversary from being successful, which is really what this is all about. And so, just to summarize, really what we've talked about, right? We've walked through each of these stages of the typical modern kill chain. We've seen how attackers are getting clever at evading traditional security approaches, and how they react to what network defenders are doing, and so they evolve. And what we've done is we've taken these concepts of machine learning, deep learning, and generative AI, combined the strengths of all three of those into a concept that we call precision AI, and re-architected all of our security services to leverage this technical foundation. And that's how we're able to knock down each and every one of those modern tricks that the adversary performs to get in and breach organizations.
That really turns it into my favorite word: prevention, prevention, prevention. If you can, and stopping it at each stage of the attack life cycle, like you were saying, multiple up at bats, or if we want to use a soccer analogy, multiple shots on goal. I think that's one of the key things to maximize your capability for prevention.
Yep. Yep. And this is really what we've been focused on. It keeps us working hard and making sure we're delivering, industry best capabilities. Precision AI is a big part of how we do that. And the takeaway here, I think, is the only way to deliver the prevention rates that we're able to deliver is with these best in class capabilities. A multi-vector approach to be able to address every element of the kill chain, do that consistently across your entire organization. So we're not just doing this in web, we're doing this in cloud, we're doing this in SaaS, we're doing this for your mobile users as well as your hybrid users, as well as your campus and branch and HQ. So it's got to be consistent everywhere. And then the network effect of that install base really becomes an asset. And the bigger that install base gets, the more and more of an asset that becomes. And that, in a nutshell, is how we're able to deliver those detection and prevention rates that we are as a NetSec platform.
So I think the one thing there is also across whatever form factors you have. So if you're using hardware next generation firewalls, you're using secure access service edge like our Prisma Access capability, as you mentioned, our software firewalls, or our new secure enterprise browser, Prisma Access browser, having advanced URL filtering, advanced wildfire to be able to stop the phishing attack, even for contractors using our Prisma Access browser. This allows you to deliver that best in class protection no matter where you are, no matter which form factor you have. I think this even just dramatically increases this. And with a unified management capability to be able to manage a single policy no matter what form factor you have, that makes it easier to maximize your opportunities as well.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the browser. It's one of my favorite things that we're doing now is adding the browser as one of those key points of visibility and enforcement. For we've talked about hardware and VM and Prisma Access for cloud delivered SASE. Really, the next evolution is doing all of this and now browser delivered, which we are doing.
I installed it on my phone in just 3 minutes. I had on
Yeah.
my personal device, I had Prisma Access browser with our corporate best in class protections
Mhm.
instantly for then corporate applications. That was easy.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. All right, with that, John, I'll hand things over to you.
All right. Thanks, Taylor, so much. That was really amazing. And I think that really brings in a lot of questions that, really, do you really know everything that's on your network? And this is one of the things. Is there potentially Cobalt Strike leaving your network? Are there malicious DNS queries that are leaving your network? Is there unknown malware that could have been prevented? Are there risky applications in use in your network today, the same used by ransomware adversaries or other adversaries? And this is one of those tools that we have. It's called a cyber threat assessment tool to give you visibility into all your threats, all your risks, and risky applications bypassing your existing cybersecurity controls. And it's one of those things that we can make available to you to say, okay, Taylor talked about some really interesting things here. I wonder if we have some of these things that, we could have prevented more phishing attacks or malicious DNS traffic. And I'll show you exactly some of the things that we can show you in your network. So I talk about zero trust with so many organizations, but when I have 49 different remote access applications in an enterprise network, folks, that is not zero trust. Starting at the top there, Microsoft Remote Desktop Protocol. Why is that important? Because that's one of the top 3 initial access vectors for deploying ransomware attacks. This is one of the things that if it's not allowed, and again, the default port, 3389. And what port can it run on? Any port. You want to identify and possibly reduce and control where it's being used. But if any desk log me in, each one of these is not a sanctioned or tolerated application, go ahead, implicit deny. I have Rust Desk Remote Desktop. This is one of those new remote desktop applications. Again, ransomware adversaries love every single one of these. So if they are not explicitly allowed, deny them. Then on the left-hand side, I'll shift over to file sharing applications, right? 90 different file sharing applications is definitely not the aspect, not zero trust, right? At the bottom there, I have Megabase, Mega and Z being identified. This is one of the favorite places that ransomware adversaries love filling your data to. So this could be both signal and also an opportunity to stop the attack using a layer 7 application-based policy. And the cyber threat assessment shows you. You can see all the instant messaging, encrypted tunnel, or email applications. But what about on the left-hand side? Do you have AI being used in your organization? This can be one of the easiest things to say, oh, when I talked to a CISO, he said, we don't allow AI being used in our organization, or we only use ChatGPT. I said, you have 47 different AI applications in use, including Amazon SageMaker or Codium, right? Taylor was talking about using sanctioned applications, generative AI. Should your developers be using Codium? Is that safe and effective? This is one of those things. In the center column, I have SMB v1. This is one of those legacy protocols that Ned Pyle at Microsoft said years ago, please stop using SMB v1. This is a great opportunity for segmentation in your network and be able to have that so that nothing comes in and also nothing comes out because it's highly, highly insecure, but it's still needed in some environments. All right, Taylor talked about advanced DNS security. And like we said, 85% of malware uses DNS for that initial connection. So with you running an SLR cyber threat assessment, we can show you every part of whether it's malware DNS, whether it's phishing, whether it's grayware, strategically aged domains, possibly also proxy avoidance, both on the request and also the response. And every single time we run a cyber threat assessment, they light up like Christmas trees. The CISO, the network security team, the SOC team goes, oh my gosh, I had no idea this was bypassing my traditional defenses. And again, Taylor talked about the benefits of advanced URL filtering being now your second layer of phishing protection with all that real inline phishing prevention. In the bottom left-hand corner showed you all the URLs we've scanned in line and turned that into prevention capabilities we could possibly have stopped in your network. And in this case, malware, phishing, C2, grayware, ransomware, these are additional layers of control showing you the precision AI prevention capability we could have stopped right there. And so put it all together, right? We talked about advanced threat prevention, where we can see known vulnerability, known command and control, and known malware, but also that unknown command and control and that advanced wildfire kicking in, turning unknown files into known. And so right here, I can say, do you have Cobalt Strike in your network? Do we have injection attacks we could have prevented? So this is prescriptive to help you understand what's bypassing your security controls. And if you also, at the same time, again, the Palo Alto Networks next generation firewall, SASE software firewalls, are that intelligent network sensor. We can not only identify and discover every single IoT device in your network, as we were talking about, right? Those vulnerable security cameras and printers, but thousands and thousands of devices, not only discover, but turn that into protection and make policy recommendations. So the security camera can only talk to the security video controller, and then you have an isolated zero trust segment. So again, just putting us in, turning it on, and we do this passively on a spanner tap port. And again, this is a free offering together with the Palo Alto Networks account teams or one of our partners to be able to help you understand what's bypassing your existing controls. So there's two opportunities here. First, 2 steps to prevent your modernized threats at every stage of the attack lifecycle. If you just want to learn more about the threats that are out there, we have the 2024 Unit 42 Incident Response Report. This has a lot of great things like what are the top vulnerabilities being exploited? What are those risky applications? What are some of the adversaries also doing? And if you would like to request an SLR cyber threat assessment, then the Palo Alto Networks account team will contact you to see about how we can help you in modernizing and bringing that precision AI protection capability. So these are 2 great things. Just click the QR code there, right there, And this will send you a form to find out. It's really simple to do and can really be done easily to give you that confidence in what's bypassing your security control.
All righty. Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Thank you so much, Taylor. Tons of great information today. We got quite a number of questions there from the audience. Unfortunately, we are pushing up over time here, so we're not going to have time for Q&A. That said, the Palo Alto team will definitely be following up with any of you looking for further information, as well as handouts. This is a great place, the handout section, for you to hop over and get some additional information and follow up if you're keen, if you're excited. I know a lot of you have that energy there, so you may want to get going right away. And in there, again, you've got the Forrester Total Economic Impact Study, so you can check that out. And the ROI from this Palo Alto solution is over 300%. So this is definitely an enticing figure. You may want to check that out. Also, the security lifecycle review is also in there. Virtual UTDs, which is the ultimate test drive. This is more than a demo. This is a great way to get a hands-on look at the Palo Alto solution. So you can check all of those out, again, linked in the handouts tab before we wrap up. And with that, we have one final little bit of fun and excitement. Hopefully this goes towards some awesome holiday shopping for one of you out there. That's right, we have our $250 Amazon gift card to give away. And one quick reminder, this is a prize that needs to go to someone who is live on the webinar here to win. So thanks for everyone for sticking around a little bit past the hour. And without further ado, the winner is Rodney McLaughlin. McLaughlin? If I said that wrong, I apologize. Rodney McLaughlin from Delaware. Congratulations, Rodney. As always, we'll be in touch about claiming your prize after the webinar. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I just want to give a big thank you again to Palo Alto Networks, our speakers, Taylor and John, for making this webinar possible. And again, a huge thank you to all of you for being here and making it possible. Without an audience, without people thirsty for information and ready to take action and forge the future here, we wouldn't be able to do awesome webinars like this. So again, thanks for pulling up your heads from the day-to-day and making some mental space to discuss how to prevent modern threats at every stage of the attack lifecycle. I know I've learned a lot with this session, and I hope you have as well. And I'm going to let you all go. I hope you have an absolutely magical rest of your days, a happy holidays, and hope to see you again on a webinar here soon. Take care, everybody.